What's going on, guys? Sticks here with the Token Minorities, bringing you another deck on Pokemon TCGO, and today I'm bringing you another Legacy deck that's an oldie but a goodie, and that is one centered around Gothitelle and Accelgor that was affectionately known as GothGor in its heyday. And before I get into the deck, sorry about that, just a reminder that if you guys like this video or found it helpful, please leave a like, drop a comment, and click that subscribe button. It helps us out a ton and lets us do more cool stuff for you guys. And as for the question of the day, I'm doing the same one I do every Friday. How was your guys' past week? Did you do anything cool? And do you have anything exciting planned for this upcoming week? As for this past week, I mean, it was like 5-6 days ago now, but I watched the Floyd Mayweather-Conor McGregor fight, which actually was really hype. I mean, I was surprised that McGregor lasted as long as he did. Definitely very, very respectable showing on his part, but I mean, they don't call Floyd Money Mayweather for nothing. So that was my past week. And this upcoming week, I am starting to get absolutely slammed with exams, labs, all that different stuff. So, I mean, I'm still going to be bringing you Monday, Wednesday, Friday videos, but just a warning that they might be a little bit shorter than usual, or they might be on the shorter end coming up. That's just because my schedule is absolutely hectic, but I still want to be able to bring you guys cool stuff. So, yeah, once again, let me know anything cool happening this past week or anything cool going on this upcoming week. I'd love to hear what's going on with you guys. But anyway, onto the deck. Like I said, it is a GothGor deck centered around Accelgor with deck and cover. For a DCE, does 50 damage, and then the defending Pokemon is now paralyzed and poisoned, and then you shuffle Accelgor and all cards attached to it back into the deck. That includes Shelmet. So basically what this deck has to do is repeatedly keep going through Shelmet, keep those things on the field, keep them on the field. That way you can just consistently cycle deck and cover to keep your opponent paralyzed and poisoned. Now, normally that could be a little bit of, I mean, you could easily get out of that with things like Switch and Escape Rope, but that's where the pairing with Gothitelle with the Magic Room ability, as long as this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, your opponent can't play any item cards from his or her hand. Now, you might know that Accelgor has been paired in the expanded format with Trevenant for a while, and then the most recent pairing is with Wobbuffet because it shuts down Rush In and Retreat and all that good stuff. But Gothitelle is what we have to work with. This was the OG combination with Accelgor, so we're going with that. Just deck and cover, lock your opponent out of items. That way they can't play switch cards or anything like that, and eventually you just knock them out with deck and cover, poison, damage, all that good stuff. Now, there are a couple others that we were pairing it with. First of all is the most simple. It's Mew with the versatile ability. This Pokemon can use attacks of any Pokemon in play, yours and your opponent's. Basically, this is just a way of being able to deck and cover while simultaneously not having, to be able to deck and cover while not having to shuffle an Accelgor back into the deck. That way you can continually have Accelgor out and ready to go whenever you need it. Mew is just a one-mon way of being able to do that. We are also pairing it with Dusknoir with Sinister Hand. As often as you like during your turn, you may move one damage counter from your opponent's Pokemon to another. That pairs phenomenally with the paralysis of deck and cover, because what you can do, if you get the perfect setup, is just continually leave one of your opponent's Pokemon paralyzed the entire time. Like, the active Pokemon will just repeatedly be paralyzed. You move around damage counters, knock out stuff on the bench while the thing that is in the active keeps getting hit, but it also can't do anything because it never gets knocked out. Your opponent never really gets to move. It's just a very, pun intended, sinister combination with the paralysis of Accelgor and the item lock of Gothitelle. And finally, the one last Pokemon line that we are adding in this deck is Garbodor with Garbotoxin. Now, you might be like, wait, that absolutely makes no sense, because Garbotoxin would completely shut down Mew, Dusknoir, and Gothitelle. Three things that this deck is actually pretty darn centered around. And the reason Garbodor is in this deck is for one reason and one reason only: Virizion. Virizion just renders this deck useless, like, pretty much, otherwise, because with Virizion in play, you don't have the ability to paralyze or poison your opponent. So basically what you're doing is you're doing 50 damage, maybe 80, with Silver Bangle to just shuffle all those cards back into their deck. Virizion single-handedly destroys this deck, so that's why we're running Garbodor in there. In my testing with this deck, I have not run into a Virizion Genesect deck yet, so you can You can get rid of that for more consistency cards if you decide that you'll just take the Lost Verzi and Genesect, but the list that I found uses this and uses Garbodor, and I actually completely agree with it. This is a list that will be able to take on the vast majority of the Legacy metagame. And then as for the items, Computer Search is the A-spec of choice because obviously this deck relies a heck of a lot on puzzle pieces having the right piece at the right time, all that good stuff. So Computer Search is just able to get you exactly what you want when you want it, for Junk Arm to reuse any of the cards that we throw into the discard pile, to Level Ball, because I mean Level Ball searches out Shelmet, Accelgor, Duskull, Dusclops, Gothita, Gothorita, like all those guys, Trubbish, are sought out with Level Ball, so that's a non-discard option, so that is just beautiful and perfect for this deck. Running a couple PCOM because you can see that we're running 23 Pokemon. That is a very, very heavy line. So PCOM is able to be like, okay, I have this Pokemon in my hand. I actually want this Pokemon. This way you're not getting rid of resources, and odds are you're going to have at least one Pokemon in your hands, so you'll be able to PCOM. And then the final search option is Ultra Ball, just guaranteed to get you anything you want when you want it. I tinkered with this line a little bit and decided that, you know what, I'm just going to go with 222. I mean, it seems to work, but definitely try different combinations of these numbers out for yourself. 2 Random Receiver, that way Junk Arm can turn into a supporter. 2 Rare Candy to go straight from like Duskull into Dusclops, Gothita into Gothitelle. You could run more, and actually if you want to get rid of the Trubbish and Garbodor, I would highly encourage adding at least 1 more Rare Candy, if not 2, but 2 seems to work for the purposes of this deck. 1 Super Rod allows us to recur Pokemon. I mean, we can't recur any energy, but Super Rod's as good as we have for that. 1 Switch in case we don't have Float Stone on something that we want to get out of the active. Tool Scrapper to shut off our opposing Garbotoxin, like if we're up against a Lando Mewtwo deck. Tool Scrapper allows us to get rid of that Garbotoxin and then continue our item lock, our Sinister Hand shenanigans, all that good stuff. As for the supporters, 4 Oak and 2 N as really just the higher number of supporters because you want to shuffle draw, you don't want to discard a ton of resources. That being said, Juniper's draw power is sometimes just unmatched, so if you decide that, you know what, I just want a whole fresh hand, I want to reset, what I have in my hand isn't really worth saving, Juniper just gets you a fresh hand of 7, which is phenomenal in this deck. And finally 1 Skyla to search out that Rare Candy, that Silver Bangle, that Level Ball, just all those types of stuff that you need for certain situations, certain puzzle pieces, and you can even just Skyla for a Computer Search if you need to. Running 3 Float Stone because, I mean, Gothitelle has a 2 retreat cost that we don't want to have to pay with a DCE, so just throw a Float Stone onto Gothitelle, that way you can just freely retreat back out into Accelgor after you item lock your opponent for the turn, and then deck and cover once again, just kind of a rotating wheel, but also it's something you can put on Dusknoir because 3 energy, retreat, and Garbodor in order to activate Garbotoxin if you want that. We're also running 2 Silver Bangle to help with the math of deck and cover, just increase the damage that we get each turn, and finally 4 DCE, just because, I mean, that's exactly what this deck relies on. Now, you might notice that Verbank is not in this deck. I'll be honest, I just didn't have room. Like, there was simply not room for Verbank with all of that. So, I mean, once again, if you want to get rid of Trubbish and Garbodor, I would actually encourage you to add an extra Rare Candy as well as 3 Verbank City Gyms. Maybe an extra Rare Candy, 2 Verbank, and another Dusknoir or something like that. But either way, if you get rid of Trubbish and Garbodor, add Verbank, that adds damage counters on the board, which is exactly what you want in this deck, especially with Sinister Hand being able to pull off those shenanigans. So, yeah, that is the deck. Let's go ahead and see it in action. Alrighty, we have found one against, looks like a grass deck of sorts. And so we do get to go for the coin flip. Do we get to go first? No, unfortunately we do not. Tails never fails except when it does. So, yeah, slightly unfortunate right there. But we're just going to be waiting on my... Yeah, that's what I figured. I mean, I figured my opponent would want to go first. But, okay, so I start with nothing. Good to know. I mean, at the same time, like, this hand wasn't immaculate anyway. I really would just like to get a Gothita and a Shelmet at the very least, and looks like we are going to mulligan once again. It's not the end of the world, but okay, this is a hand we can work with. Because I can get a couple Shelmet down, I can PCOM for a Gothita, I can Random Receiver for a new supporter. I have plenty of plays that I can make at this point. So it's just a matter of... yeah, it's just a matter of making those plays and hopefully not drawing dead off supporters, which is definitely an option with this deck, or a possibility with this deck. My opponent starts with Genesect, so maybe a Celebi Genesect deck? Maybe? I don't know. Actually, that's kind of scary that we see the Genesect, because if this is Celebi Genesect and Virizion comes out, then I will want to play Garbodor for sure, which, yeah, it does shut off my item lock, but at the same time, like, if it allows me to paralyze and poison, I should be able to work my way out of it. My opponent plays Level Ball, probably going to grab Celebi. Grabs Bulbasaur. Huh. That's kind of interesting, to say the least. Not sure why my opponent runs Bulbasaur. Unless this is just one of those more random legacy decks. I was about to say, like, in my testing with this deck, every time I went up against Virizion Genesect, like, I just got absolutely smashed, because, like, they'd see that I'd be trying to set up a Trubbish in the background, they'd immediately just Red Signal and Megalo Cannon to knock that thing out. Like, there really wasn't just much I could do, so maybe if this isn't a top-tier legacy deck, then I have a chance, but if it turns out that Venusaur is actually a really cool tech, then I'm pretty much just screwed. So, wow, I even get a Duskull, so this setup is actually going to be pretty perfect. So what I can do is PCOM, put that back, grab a Gothita, so that I can potentially get a Gothitelle up and going, and then let's play the Duskull as well, Random Receiver, see what type of supporter I get, and I get an N. Not the best, considering my opponent didn't look like they had much, but still, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. And I get a couple DCEs, which I can actually work with, so let's play this one onto the one on the bench. Float Stone... Actually, I'm going to hold on to that in case my opponent tries to Red Signal out one of my things on the bench, because, I mean, Gothitelle obviously needs one. Trubbish only needs one if I play Garbodor, because otherwise I just don't really need it much at all. My opponent does play Roselia, or Roselia, however you want to say it, which means playing Roserade, which can be, if it's the Le Parfum one, that could be kind of annoying. Actually, that would be really annoying, because my opponent would be able to grab whatever they wanted from the deck. So, my opponent does just attach and evolve, so he's allowing me to get more set up. What I'm going to do is DCE up my active Shelmet. Computer Search, get rid of my Tool Scrapper, and the Gothita probably just grab... I think just grab a... yeah, Gothorita, so that I can slowly get this set up, because it doesn't look like my opponent has much at all. Let's evolve the Gothita into Gothorita, play the Float Stone, and then Juniper away my hand, get a fresh hand, and there we go. This I can work with, because what I can do right here, Level Ball, grab an Accelgor, that way I have the Poison and Paralysis up and ready to go as soon as whenever I want to attack. And then let's get rid of the... This is tricky, so let's get rid of the Skyla and the Duskull to grab another Level Ball. Yeah, this will allow me to get set up a little bit better. And then I think I'm just going to hold on to it. That way I can for sure have a deck and cover on board next turn. So for the time being, I am just going to promote my... I don't want to promote Gothorita because it's not there yet. I'm going to promote Duskull, just because, I mean, if my opponent knocks it out, great, no big deal. If my opponent doesn't knock it out, then I have a Float Stone in my hand to be able to free retreat. And we have an Energy Signal Roserade. Whenever you attach an energy from your hand... Yeah, it's not a not overly significant, but honestly, I think I'm in a great spot. I'm holding on to the Trubbish. I'm actually putting a little bit of emphasis on keeping the Trubbish safe. The defending Pokemon is now... Oh. But I'm actually putting a little emphasis on keeping the Trubbish safe because I'm convinced that my opponent has a Virizion in the background. And as soon as he gets that thing up and going, that's going to be just all sorts of bad news for me because then deck and cover is just completely shut down. I managed to top deck the Accelgor, which is perfect for me. Let's level ball for another Shelmet just to be able to play that down, put a DCE on it, and this way I can possibly chain even more, Float Stone up the Duskull, and then get a fresh hand. Unfortunately, I still don't get my Gothitelle or anything that can lead to a Gothitelle, so I'm just going to go into Accelgor, deck and cover once again, and yeah, I mean, just promote the Duskull once again. If I can get a Dusknoir this turn, then I will be able to just move all the energy, lock the Genesect in the active, and then just load up my opponent's benched Pokemon with the damage counters so that that way I lock Genesect while just taking prizes anywhere else. That way my opponent really can't do much of anything at all. At least I'm continually getting supporters. At the very least, I'm continually getting supporters, so that is something that I can kind of I can hang my hat on at the very least. Genesect, because it has all this energy, I think I still want it to get knocked out, but I think I'm going to want to manipulate the damage counters so that I knock it out coming back into my turn. That way I don't have to, kind of leave damage on the board, as it were. In the sense that if I knock it out going into my opponent's turn, that's 10 damage. If I don't even let Poison knock it out, that's however much damage was left with deck and cover. So I think for the time being, I'm just going to... for the time being, I'm obviously just going to leave Genesect up there, and if I have to knock it out, then without moving damage counters, then I will, because, hey, it's 2 prizes and it's already completely loaded up. But the more I watch my opponent's deck, the more it's apparent that it's just kind of a thrown together legacy type of deck. It's okay. I'm never saying don't do this. I'm never telling you guys, oh, if you can't build one of the top tier decks and just stay out of legacy. No. I encourage you guys to all go and check out legacy format. Even if you have to just build a deck that's a bunch of it's 60 random cards that are in the legacy format. I encourage you guys to try it out just because it is so much different from expanded and standard. It's a really, really fun metagame that I encourage you guys to try out, even if you do have to build a random deck. I'm simply just pointing that out right now that my opponent appears to have just a random type of deck. So that's all I'm saying. Not insulting my opponent. I'm not being get out of here if you can't. If you can't build a deck full of secret rares, then you don't belong in the game. No, not saying that at all. In fact, I'm saying the opposite of that. I'm saying if you can't, please come check it out. I love the legacy format. It is very, very fun. But I was just making an observation. So what I can do, actually, because I top decked a Pokemon, is PCOM grab another Shelmet. I was thinking about potentially PCOMing for a Dusknoir, but I think just continually streaming Shelmets and having them on board is the way to go. Alright, so I get a Mew as well, which is nice, and I finally get my Gothitelle. So I'll be able to take 2 prizes. Let's go ahead and evolve one Shelmet up to Accelgor, evolve the Gothorita into Gothitelle, retreat into Accelgor. Maybe. Do I want to just... Nah, there's no way that Poison... My opponent won't die to Poison coming back into my turn. So I think, even though I don't want to, I'm just going to deck and cover. Knocks out the Genesect, and I'm going to have to promote my... I'm going to promote my Gothitelle. But at this point, if I can get a... as long as I just get an Accelgor on board, I can just use Mew repeatedly, because that way it allows me to always have a deck and cover on board. It's just a mon that I can just slap down and go from there. And I would like a supporter, though. I would very much like a supporter this turn. He does confuse my Gothitelle, which isn't a big deal, because, I mean, I retreat that thing out anyway, and I get a DCE, but no Accelgor. So, for the time being, I'm just going to DCE up the Mew. Yeah, let's do that. And then I think just... let's play another Mew down. And then let's end my turn right there. I mean, at the very least, my opponent is still item locked. So I really don't have to worry about that. I mean, I don't have to worry about them potentially doing something crazy that puts me in a really bad spot. The second I draw into a... So what I want right now is I want a rare candy. Like, I really want a rare candy. That way I can get into a Dusknoir and start spreading around damage onto stuff on the bench. Because the second I'm able to start doing that, then it's not going to be good. My opponent... Ooh, that Roserade's actually starting to be a little bit scary. But what I'm going to do is evolve up into Garbodor and then Oak. I mean, Garbodor, I'm not going to attach an energy to it. I'm not going to attach a tool to it. So I get my Dusclops, which is one step closer to a Dusknoir. Let's DCE up a Mew, go ahead and retreat into said Mew, and then this is where the deck is about to start to shine. Because I can go ahead and deck and cover on the Roserade, bring up my Gothitelle, item lock my opponent, and then next turn, no matter what I draw off the top of the deck, I mean, unless it's like a DCE or something, then I'd be like, ah, darn it. But no matter what I draw off the top of the deck, I can always just Ultra Ball that away in order to evolve into Dusknoir and then start spreading damage around onto stuff on my opponent's bench. And then, yeah, so my opponent's paralyzed and item locked and poisoned, and I'm going to be able to start spreading damage counters around. So there's really just not a lot that my opponent can do at this point to keep from losing. So I get an... darn it. I mean, I don't like getting rid of Shelmet, but I kind of have to in order to get a Dusknoir going. So now you guys can actually see this deck fully set up as it was meant to do. And then let's Juniper away my hand, see what I can get. Well, I get another Gothitelle. I don't need that anymore. So let's Ultra Ball, get rid of the Gothitelle and the Garbodor to grab another Shelmet. I could have grabbed Mew, but because I have the Accelgor in my hand, I mean, Accelgors are almost always better than Mews, just because, I mean, in the instance that my Garbodor gets a Float Stone on it, like if my opponent brings it out with an item or something like that, then that'll be fine. But yeah, now we get to go through the very tedious process of moving everything with Sinister Hand, of this is annoying, of just spreading around damage. I'm just trying to make it so that the Roserade dies coming into my turn. And then, yeah, so there we go. Alright, Roserade will die coming into my turn. Let's go ahead and deck and cover with Mew, paralyze that thing, and then, yeah, we're good. Let's go ahead and promote Gothitelle once again. My opponent's going to be paralyzed, and then coming back into my turn, he will get knocked out, so I take a prize. And pretty much, like, this is just how the rest of the game's going to go. My opponent is not even able to play down a Virizion EX for Verdant Wind to be able to do anything. I think my opponent just has a bunch of items at this point to where he can't do much of anything. So I think the game is pretty much... mine at this point. I don't see a way that my opponent can work his way out of this. Because, yeah, Roserade will literally just go down to poison coming back into my turn. I have two I have 2 Accelgors all set up and ready to go. Well, I have 1 Accelgor set up and ready to go. I have one that I have an Accelgor in my hand for next turn. So at this point, like, I don't really need to play any cards from my hand apart from just like streaming Accelgors. Like, that's admittedly all I need to do. So my opponent does grab an interviewer's questions just for some energy, just be able to continually have energy, I guess, which, I mean, hey, my opponent's playing it out, props to them. But at this point, unless I make a big math mistake, I don't see my opponent even being able to get an attack off at this point. So I get a Float Stone off of the prizes. My opponent is going to promote as Ivysaur. Huh. So I actually kind of disagree with that one. I think you want Ivysaur to be able to, well, unless he has a Venusaur, because evolution is actually one of the ways that you can get out of this. Because, I mean, that obviously resets all of those status conditions. So let's go ahead and move... Let's go ahead and move all but 20 onto the Turtwig. I mean, it really doesn't matter because I can move the energy wherever I want regardless. And I think at this point I'm actually going to try to keep the Venusaur, or the Ivysaur, stuck. Knocking out Turtwig, I think, is my way of winning the game, because Ivysaur is just kind of a damage sponge, or a damage counter sponge. So let's go ahead and, yeah, you know what, let's Oak, see if I can get like a Mew in DC or something like that, which I do. So that's one way to, that's another way of going about it. And then I think, yeah, let's Super Rod to make sure I don't deck myself out. Let's just go ahead and put these guys back. I mean, it really doesn't matter. I just want to make sure that I don't take too long and end up decking myself out. So yeah, let's just go ahead and deck and cover right here. Paralyze that Ivysaur, and I mean, it's not going anywhere. Unless my opponent has a Venusaur in his hand, it's stuck. So I'm just going to be able to knock out like the Pidove, Wurmple, or Snivy on the bench, and then just leave this thing paralyzed and poisoned. So this game, yeah, this game is pretty much over at this point. My opponent can attach all the energy he wants, but unless he has a Virizion or a Venusaur, I'm going to be able to leave his Ivysaur active and then just continually move the damage counters away from that onto his bench stuff. And yeah, my opponent sees the writing on the wall and just decides to concede. So we are able to take that win. And I mean, yeah, I know it wasn't the most competitive match in the world, but it was the deck working literally exactly as it was supposed to. I even had the Garbodor set up ready to have a Float Stone attached to it in case my opponent played down a Virizion or something like that. So, I mean, that was compared to other Legacy matches I've gotten, that's one of the better ones in terms of showing off exactly what this deck is supposed to do. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, and this is Styx signing out. Why not? See you guys.